Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we had a huge week in Harrisburg this past week, and guess what? The governor made his legislative proposal, that is the budget to the state legislature, more than $31 billion. Not a huge percentage increase in the budget overall, about 1.8%, and we've got a couple of the state's leading reporters that are going to be on in a few minutes to give us an overview. But first, we're going to hear from representatives of the business community, and we'll do that following these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, here we go again, another budget season and another what could be big battle in the legislature between the governor and the Republican-controlled legislature. Joining me to talk about that is Gene Barr. He's the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, and Dave Taylor. He's the president of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Gene, I'll start with you. From the point of view, and by the way, we're going to have people in over the next couple of weeks to talk about various aspects of it. Obviously, we have two of the state's leading business representatives here. Their organizations represent, can I say millions between the two of you,
Millions
think?
of employees, sure.
That's what I mean,
Absolutely.
millions of employees.
Sure.
All right, Gene, let's start with you. The governor didn't call for general tax hikes, but there are taxes in there that, in effect, would affect the business community. Am I right or wrong about that?
In fact, let's set this up first. The tone of this budget was distinctly different than the tone we saw, particularly 2 years ago.
Right.
And in fact, even the Republicans commented on that the governors come in with more of an efficiency type. However, it's also important to note that there are $1 billion in new taxes, and that billion rests squarely on the business community, to be honest. There's an additional tax proposed on natural gas. There's minimum wage hikes. There's a number of things that truly concern people like Dave and I, because we think this is going to hamstring our ability to recover. Our unemployment rate is too high. We've had a recovery that hasn't been as good as we think it should be. And these taxes, unfortunately, are going to hamstring that. We need to find better ways of moving forward.
Yeah. Dave, the governor has proposed, first of all, during his campaign in 2014, a tax on the amount of natural gas, the extraction, the per cubic feet out of the well. That's what the shale tax is based on, 5%. He's also called for 6.5% at different times in the budgets. Now he's 6.5% shale tax. The legislature hasn't passed it. This would be the third time it's proposed. What's your sense about that?
Well, I mean, it's not going to happen, and it shouldn't. For the legislators who are tired of having to choose between tax increases and spending cuts, the answer is growth. We need broad-based, sustained economic growth across the Commonwealth, and this energy opportunity is the best chance Pennsylvania has of achieving that. The idea that we would impose new industry-specific punitive taxes to depress what should be an engine of growth is just completely counterproductive. And Terry, I'd just say some of the other tax increases that the governor proposed are all retreads from back in the Rendell administration, the things that have failed before. In fact, the one tax, the new computer services tax, there's only 3 states in the nation that have that kind of a tax. It goes back to the 1991 tax increase that Governor Casey put in place, and that was repealed during the Ridge years. I mean, these sorts of things, it's just not what Pennsylvania's economy needs.
Yeah. But, I mean, we'll talk about the politics of it in the next segment, what's likely to happen. You guys have a handle on what's going on in the legislature. But there are some other forms of taxation in it that would affect the business community, something that I'm going to ask you to explain because I get lost in trying to understand it, is something called the Delaware loophole, right? You get
First off, it doesn't exist. Let's go with that.
The loophole has no meaning in law.
Okay, but you do. Am I right that that's the words that
it has
get
been
used?
Proposed that that's already been taken care of 3 years ago.
Okay.
The proposal that's been out there for quite some time is something called combined reporting, and not to get too far down into the details, but basically Pennsylvania is a separate company state. If Terry Madonna, Inc. operates in Pennsylvania, you pay taxes on Pennsylvania. If you also operate in 3 other states, you only pay what happens in Pennsylvania. Combined reporting would take all of Terry Madonna, Inc., and the Department of Revenue would decide which portion would come into Terry Madonna, Inc. and make a decision about how much of that they're going to tax at a 9.99 rate.
Okay.
And
That's
this is
the
a bad
problem.
idea because all 50 states have separate and distinct systems of taxation, different kinds of taxes with different rates, different definitions, and different tests of applicability. So there can never be an apples-to-apples comparison.
Yeah.
Giving the Treasury, the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue, the powers of the IRS, it's going to take away predictability from tax compliance. It's going to make every encounter with the State Department of Revenue a negotiation as to how they will choose to assess your operations in other states. So, and again, the bias of the department is going to be to maximize collections to the Commonwealth. And so this is going to lead a lot of businesses to take these cases to court.
Yeah.
It's going to tie things up for years because the government can't take the tax money, and also the business can't use it for investment. So
Even
everybody
the-
Gene, go ahead.
Yeah,
No,
even the
make your point.
changes made 3 years ago, which we worked with to try and mitigate, have already resulted in litigation between those companies and the Department of Revenue, and that's nowhere near as far as combined reporting.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, the corporate net income tax, as I understand it, is 9.99,
Correct.
but they say that, what is it, 2/3, 3/4 of the companies don't pay it. Let's get.
We'll love to address
Yes,
that.
I know you're both
Love to
smiling. All
address
right, we'll
that.
get to that and plenty more after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, now celebrating 100 years as the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back to the program. Well, this week and the next couple of weeks, we're taking a look at various aspects of the Pennsylvania budget. We have representatives from the business community. What's your name? Dave Taylor and Gene Barr. These guys come on here a good bit. We're welcome to have them. All right, Gene, where did we end this? We were looking at this 9.9% corporate net income tax. The argument I hear, or the point I hear made many times is, well, 2/3 or 3/4 of the businesses don't pay it. I know you want to answer this.
Let's address that. And let's first talk about what the tax structure here looks like, because there's basically, from a tax levy, two kinds. There's groups that pay the 3.07 that we all pay as individuals because they paid as individuals. Those are small businesses, tend to be.
Income tax.
The larger companies pay something called the corporate net income tax rate, which at 9.99 is the highest effective rate in the United States. And what we hear often, oh, geez, they don't pay it. Well, the reality is that there are many corporations that are set up as real estate holding companies, never designed to make money. Various kinds of entities like that that are set up for personal liability or for liability protections. You have companies that no longer exist that may still be on the books that don't operate. And finally, you have companies that flat out don't make money in a given year. So when you compare Pennsylvania and the percent that don't pay with a state like, I believe, Utah that has combined reporting, oddly enough, the percentages of corporations that don't pay are virtually identical, because there are companies that are set up not to make money. They're holding companies, they're liability protection, they're out of business, or they don't make money. So this is really a red herring argument. And Pennsylvania's 9.99 rate is a red flag for companies who come here. Now, the governor said he wants to drop it. Our concern is to get combined reporting in exchange for the promise of reductions gets difficult.
It's an increase?
Just like capital stock and franchise tax, it was delayed for years and years and years. Our concern is that we don't get those. We don't get those reductions as promised.
Did you want to add anything to that before I get to it?
I would repeat what Gene said earlier, that it was the addition of expense add-back provisions to give the Revenue Secretary the power to disallow transactions that appear fraudulent. This issue has already been addressed, so there is no pot of leprechaun gold waiting at the end of the combined reporting rainbow. All it's going to do is increase costs to employers, increase the complexity of the system, and tie things up in court for years.
All right. One of the things, there are a couple of issues that the governor did not address that we hear a lot about. One is property tax reform, and every session there are bills introduced to do something about that, to get rid of the property tax either in whole or in part. But the other aspect that he didn't address has to do with pensions. We're looking at, for the two big state pension systems, one for school personnel and one for state employees.
Right.
I hear estimates from $50 to $60 billion.
Correct.
In terms of you pay off everybody who's entitled to it under the law.
Correct. The unfunded liability.
Under unfunded liability. So where does that stand, do you think?
Well, I mean, it's a crisis. It's been a crisis for years. We've seen this coming, and we haven't had the political courage to actually get to a meaningful conclusion. The time has come. We've got to get this done. And while I hear that there are negotiations that are taking place, it was regrettable that the governor didn't specifically make mention of this and the need to address it while he was there in making the budget speech, because again, until and unless we fix this, as we and the chamber have said many times, there's no point in talking about anything else. Yeah. Because this is just so enormous.
Look, one of the things that I thought was the governor didn't want to bring it up because he wants to use it to negotiate with. He called in. I was on the Pennsylvania Cable Network call-in program, and he called in and said, well, there are certain types of change that I would agree to.
Yes.
For example, I think he would agree to up to a certain amount, let's say up to $50,000. State employees, school personnel would continue in the defined benefit program. Above that, they would go into defined contribution. But a bill still hasn't been passed the legislature.
It hasn't passed completely. He did veto one, Senate Bill 1, but I think people are now looking more at what's called a side-by-side hybrid. Our preference would be that you put everybody in a 401k. It doesn't appear to have the votes for that. But Dave's exactly right. This is the biggest fiscal crisis that we face. There seems to be, and our view is that it should be solved before you get into the budget. Don't throw this into the swirling waters of the Pennsylvania budget. Let's get this done in advance. It's as much as $72 billion unfunded liability. Tens of billions of that are related to the fact that in 2001 we made a retroactive benefit increase that we really haven't accounted for. So this is the most significant problem facing this Commonwealth from a financial basis, without a doubt.
Look, I want to thank both of you for coming in, give the business point of view. As I said, we're going to have lots of people come in and take a look at all angles of this budget. But next, Marc Levy with the Associated Press and Angela Couloumbis with the Philadelphia Inquirer. We're going to look at, broadly speaking, many other aspects of the budget, and we'll do that after we pay some bills.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania, and by the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, representing companies involved in America's most affordable, reliable energy source. To learn more, visit pacoalalliance.com.
Well, two of the state's leading reporters join me for a kind of an overview of the budget. We're going to take a look at winners and losers. The two reporters, aforementioned reporters, Marc Levy with the Associated Press and Angela Couloumbis with the Philadelphia Inquirer. Both have been covering, I won't get into how long, the state legislature and the budgets. We'll skip that. All right, Marc, budgets always produce winners and losers. Yeah. Let's start on the upbeat, the winners. Who are the winners in this?
So the governor found $100 million more for public schools, $25 million more for special education costs, a lot more money for early childhood education programs, about 40% more there. Some more money for counties to do their child welfare programs. They're getting a lot more calls because of new state laws about reporting child abuse. And there's more money for people with intellectual disabilities, adults with intellectual disabilities and autism who need day services, home care.
Look, you wrote a great summary that I'm using shamelessly. Is there any way, is that online anywhere that the folks out there could get it?
Yes, if you got it, then it's online.
Okay, so how would they do that? AP?
They could probably Google something like highlights of Tom Wolf's third state budget.
Yeah, you really, if you're really interested, there's a great summary of all the big aspects of the bill. Well, I'll go to you, Angela. There are losers.
Sure.
Or the budget proposal, I should say. But it'll be a bill before long. Go ahead.
Under Governor Wolf's budget, we did not see any additional money for higher education. So the state-relateds have been flat funded.
Pitt, Penn State,
right.
Temple, and Lincoln, and community colleges too.
And community
colleges, although the 14 universities within the state system got some money.
Yeah,
but
$8.9 million.
But it's really a drop in the bucket for them. Going forward again with losers, I guess you could call the drilling industry, the natural gas drilling industry, losers. They are going to be subject potentially to a 6.5% tax. And then you have this whole real interesting aspect of Governor Wolf's budget that talks about putting a fee on communities that receive coverage from the Pennsylvania State Police.
Oh, that's a huge issue, right. Now, here's what I heard. Either one of you can respond to this. 67% of Pennsylvania counties get all of their police service from the state police or part of it. Half of them get them from state police totally. And if you look at the map, it's rural and small town Pennsylvania that needs the help. And boy, that's going to set up. I was actually, there have been bills in the legislature in the past, but I was surprised by that. Either one of you.
I would just correct one thing you said. It's municipalities, not counties.
Oh, I'm sorry, municipalities.
But you're right. Half of the state's municipalities get completely free state police coverage. So if there's a burglary, they're responding to it.
Right.
And Tom Ridge, in the 1990s, the governor tried to impose a fee, and that failed.
I don't have any sense about what the legislature is likely to do. I mean, this could create a split between, a lot of Republicans represent rural and small town Pennsylvania, these municipalities, far more than Democrats do. So that would be interesting to see how that plays out. Did you get any immediate reaction? I didn't hear a lot of immediate.
They stayed away from one. No, they really kind of stayed away from it. They said, "Well, we'll look at it." And I think, given the budget crunch, they're not outright rejecting it. The only outright rejection that I heard on one of Governor Wolf's proposals was the Marcellus shale tax.
Yeah, that's been tough.
The Senate, and he's tried it in the last couple of budgets and has been unsuccessful. And the Senate Republicans flat out said that they would not do it. The tone, however, from Republicans in the House was surprisingly more conciliatory.
Yeah, that's it. All right, we're going to run to a break. Minimum wage, $7.25 right now. The governor wants $12 an hour, indexed to inflation. We'll take over. We'll get into a little discussion of the minimum wage in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, advancing quality, improving lives. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Business Council and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation.
Well, Angela Couloumbis and Marc Levy join me. We're chatting about all things Pennsylvania budget, at least the proposal made by Governor Wolf this past week. We're going to have a variety of people on over the next couple of weeks to talk about aspects of it. All right, Marc, we didn't get into another aspect of the state police coverage and how that gets paid for. You want to weigh in on that?
Yes, the state police budget has been growing rapidly over the past couple of decades, and increasingly the state is drawing from highway construction funds to pay for the state police budget. And arguably, that's unconstitutional. That now with the growing responsibility the state police have to cover municipalities that don't have their own police force, you can't use highway construction funds to pay for something that doesn't involve highway safety. And so the state is under pressure to find money for that state police budget.
You know, in general, one of the things that's happened, and you, again, as I mentioned, have covered lots of state budget, is they keep borrowing, they keep going into different funds. The rainy day fund, for example, I think at one point it had over $1 billion, and it's supposed to be if there's an emergency, it comes up. And now, did I understand this right? It's got a couple $100,000 in it. Did I get that right? Do you know?
Yeah, I think the figure I was given was $265,000, which wouldn't, get the state through about 5 minutes of operational time.
That's great. All right, minimum wage. Take it.
Well, there is a proposal on the table to increase it, but there's been these types of proposals in the past. So I don't necessarily know whether it's going to see any more success than this time around than it did in the past. And again, it was one of those things you didn't hear Republicans really address it, and it wasn't a big part of their conversation post-budget.
Yeah, it's one of those who knows. Could be.
I think Republicans asked about it are saying, look, we prefer the federal system. If it's going to be raised anywhere, it should be raised in Congress from the $7.25 it's currently set at.
Yeah. All right, we have about a minute and a half. Anything else in there that struck you, either of you, as something that maybe hasn't gotten a lot of reporting but is important? We didn't. Go ahead.
You made the point that they're relying on borrowing funds. I mean, they're tapping money from a medical malpractice fund. They're tapping money from a workers' compensation fund. But like Angela said, it was striking that House Republican leadership was actually fairly positive and conciliatory about this budget. The Senate Republicans not so much.
But one of the things is when I looked at it, the massive reorganization, efficiency measures, and restructuring is mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's hard for Republicans to come out and criticize that. I guess I was struck by the fact that they didn't immediately question Governor Wolf's $2 billion figure, saying, I don't know if what he's proposing can actually add up to that amount in savings. But I do think that's going to be part of the conversation going forward.
And that won't take place. The governor's proposing this massive, I'll call it reorganization and efficiency measures. We're almost out of time. But the fact is that it's going to take years for that to take place, no?
It could take years for that savings to accrue. If it does save money, it may be that we'll never really be able to tell one way or the other definitively. But the other thing is that his $2 billion in savings and cuts is not really $2 billion in savings and cuts.
Good point. You get the last word. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.